As we all know, the objective of this particular chapter is to promote literary, and we decided that in initial stages we do fortnight, each session after every 2 weeks. This is our second chapter, the second week since we initiated this Africa chapter. I want to also thank those members who have come. The speaker of today was Mr. Odhiambo Kaumah, who is an educator, a poet, and who has taken his time to attend and do for us the review today. I want to urge members that let's invite others. Let's welcome writers into the platform. This will give them a good platform to market their skill, hone their skill, and make us all grow together as a team. I think with those few remarks, I get back the session to Mr. Anil. Yes, Mr. Anil,
Yes, Rodgers, sir. Go ahead.
Do I introduce the speaker
yes, yes. You are the program manager. You introduce the speaker. Yes, it's absolutely. It's all in your control now.
Okay, thank you. Our speaker, just as Mr. Anil had done introduction, our speaker today is Odhiambo Kaumah. Odhiambo Kaumah is a renowned writer here in Kenya. Most of his work has been published in the mainstream media. He has books under his name. Today he's going to review for us the book, The Vagabond. Odhiambo Kaumah, the floor is yours. The presentation will take 20 minutes. Odhiambo, now that today we don't have a story, so we'll give you the chance to have 20 minutes, then we'll welcome the reactions of members to react on the presentation. So Mr. Odhiambo Kaumah, welcome.
Thank you once again, Rodgers, for this brilliant opportunity that you've given me. I'm glad to be attending the second chapter of e-Bookery platform that is actually aiming at airing our stories out there and giving authors and readers a platform to share various viewpoints, engage in constructive literary discourse. As I've been introduced, I'm Odhiambo Kaumah, and I'm a teacher, a poet, and a creative writer in general. But today, I'm not going to concentrate much on my works. I'm going to review a very interesting historical novel by a renowned writer by the name Ambassador M.G.N. Kahende. Ambassador M.G.N. Kahende is a prolific writer who's written a various work of fiction, but most of his books are historical fiction. When I talk about historical fiction, these are a very serious genre that tries to create fiction out of history. So in a very creative way, M.G.N. Kahende tries to reimagine the process and the event of colonialism in Africa. In his book, David Livingstone, The Wayward Vagabond. To begin with, this book has almost, let me say, the two viewpoints. That is the part of fiction and also the part of history. So much more, I'm going to try to balance between the history of M.G.N. Kahende's book and also the fiction part of it. But as I advance in my discussion, I will basically try to reimagine the history, because I also want to connect this book to a very interesting work that I recently featured in, and that is the first issue of the Nairobi Reader the first issue of the Nairobi Reader, which, if you can see from my screen, I don't know whether my lighting is okay. It's called The Cultural Significance of Names and the Politics of Naming. This is a collection of around 10 essays that tries to address the issue of naming and the politics of it. So I'll try to give a synopsis of the book and later on try to get a connection between the content, the history and the fiction of this particular book, and why I feel that this book particularly has a great connection with this collection of essays on yet another very interesting topic that is not only a topic in Africa, but the world over. So this is the book I'm talking about, The Wayward Vagabond, David Livingstone. So historically, we know David Livingstone as a missionary whose tours or whose visits in Africa changed the world ways. So in Ambassador MGN Kahende's story, he tries to reimagine the role that David Livingstone played in the colonialism in Africa. He traces the life of David Livingstone from his from his homeland of Scotland and the city of Blantyre, that is in early 19th century. He chooses a very interesting voice of narration here, and the narrator is a spirit, a soulless spirit. He calls himself everywhere. And the spirit here is born in a land called Kuzania. There's a fictional land called Kuzania, which by his writing appears to be the continent of Africa. So the spirit receives a call from St. Paul, that is a biblical, St. Peter, a biblical allusion there, who tells him to tour the world and go all the way to Scotland to record events that are going to change the history of the world. The spirit really wonders what his role is there in the world, because it describes itself as a soulless spirit, an escapee from the order of the world. So it's given such a wide power and a natural power to tour the world freely, balancing, skiving on snows, climbing mountains, running on plains, and visiting some of the weirdest caves in the world to bring to light an event that is about to change the history of the world. So at Blantyre, it finds Livingstone, a young man who is suffering from the Black Death. The Black Death historically is actually a tuberculosis that affected the world, that is in early 19th century, around 1818 and 1819. So when he is told to go and trace the life of David Livingstone, he finds him such a weak boy, a boy who is at the verge of death. And he wonders whether really his mission is going to be any fruitful, because he sees David Livingstone dying very soon. But as the story goes, David Livingstone survives the pandemic and then goes on to become a very serious academician. He migrates to London where he studies medicine and becomes a surgeon. But instead of pursuing his dream as a surgeon, he decides to venture into English, the British. It is colonized by the British, and they are going under some of the worst injustices in the world at that time. So Livingstone finds himself in this politics, and he sees himself as the savior. And this revelation comes to him in such a divine recollection, and MGN Kaende describes it as a divine mission. So it is this divine mission that will later on send David Livingstone to Africa to rescue his people. Let me explain this point and why the title is The Wayward Vagabond. As we proceed with the story, we realize that the mission that Livingstone has conceived is actually to distract the English soldiers so that they can come and conquer Africa. And in that event, Scotland can declare itself free. So Livingstone has a mission here, and the mission is to try to find a distraction for the English elsewhere apart from Europe, so that his homeland of Scotland can find independence. So the very first attempt happens actually in India, but it is not successful. He finds the Englishmen very methodical and quite planned in their expansivist missions. So at that point, he finds a ticket to Africa through a leading missionary called Robert Moffat, who had tried his tricks. I'll call them tricks because though a missionary fashioned his adventures in Africa in more political way. So he wins a trip to Africa, and at that point, he feels that he's been brought closer to his mission. And there he meets, he is able to find his way into one of the greatest historical kingdoms in Africa, and that is the kingdom of Mono Motapa, or in the local dialect, Mwene wa Mutapa. This is a kingdom that currently can be located in the current day Zimbabwe, Zambia, and partly Mozambique, and also down there in South Africa. It was such a history records the kingdom of Mono Motapa as one of the greatest kingdoms that ever stood even the test of colonialism by the Portuguese at first. So when Livingstone comes to Africa, he devises a plan to attack this kingdom. And one of his plans is actually to describe the beauty and the mineral rich, and the minerals that can be found in the kingdom of Mutapa. So he writes to the Royal Geographical Society. Historically, the Royal Geographical Society is a geographical society that sponsored most of the visits, or let me say, geographical missions in Africa to map the world and map the natural resources that are there in various parts of the world, and especially in this context in Africa. So Livingstone attracts the attention of the Royal Geographic Society, and he is given a rare opportunity. Remember, he is a Scottish, and here is attracting the attention of a British company that is touring the world in preparation for their expansivist mission. So when he gets to Zimbabwe, partly South Africa at that time, and is hosted by Moffat, who is an established missionary at this point, there arises a disagreement between him and his host, who, and then he leaves at that point and tries to tour the world. And he comes to discover the kingdom of Mwene Mutapa, and there manages to convince his way, to make his way into a very protected area, by then led by a very renowned king, King Simba. I think that name is fictitious, according to Kahende. The title of the king at that time is Changamire, which is in the local dialect of the southern. So he manages to get such a restricted area and convinces that he has a message from Queen Victoria, that is the Queen of England at that time. And the king, although very protective, gets himself down to Livingstone and listen to him, not knowing that this is a plot actually to occupy his land. So at that moment, the struggle for expansion into Africa begins. And ultimately, by Livingstone's tricks, that is, he manages to outwit the Portuguese, who are also at that time eyeing this kingdom. And his adventures with the king finally grants the British an entry into the kingdom of Monomotapa. Actually, in a fictional way, MGN Kahende imagines that the Portuguese actually at first were the first to attack the kingdom by use of such a strange illness. They managed to comically bring in sisters from the Catholic Church. Previously in the book, he tells us of a triangular relationship between Portugal, Italy, and Scotland, where the Pope, the fictional Pope here in Italy, plots a plan with the Portuguese to sneak in a very respectful term here, harlots or sisters, or harlot dressed in sisters' clothes, the Catholic nuns, in nuns' clothes, that is. And when the kingdom of Monomotapa, they are infected by such a very serious sexually transmitted disease. In that way, they managed to bring down the kingdom. So you can understand the animosity. It's just beginning. And a lot of soldiers, a lot of resources, a lot of natural resources are exploited on this coast, adding into what we know historically as the dangers or some of the injustices that were committed during the colonialism period in Africa. But what is the twist here? Remember, David Livingstone was particularly here to distract English soldiers, the Queen, into coming to Africa and then deserting their control in Scotland. Unfortunately, this one never happens. What happens is David Livingstone is abandoned. Once the British once the Englishmen have found out the resources, the amount of resources that there in the kingdom of Monomotapa, they decide to use one of their own, and that is a very serious figure in history of Southern and Central African colonial time. That is Cecil Rhodes, and by whose name Zimbabwe got its name as Southern Rhodesia and Zambia as the Northern Rhodesia. So Cecil Rhodes, who is an English here, is used instead of David Livingstone, who is a Scottish and not an English. So when he is abandoned, he gets into a totally different mission, and that is to discover the source of Nile and also to locate some of the greatest geographical wonders of Africa. And one of the greatest geographical resource that Livingstone sets his eyes on first is what is popularly known as Victoria Falls, or in the local dialect, Mosi or Tunya. In the local dialect, Mosi or Tunya means the god's smoke, which actually describes the natives' understanding of the fall and the smoke and the color and the beauty of that land as they view it. And I'll just read an extract of the act of naming that point when David Livingstone and his friend Cecil Rhodes get to that point. I'll read shortly. They came to the top of the hill, and lo, snaking for miles in as far as the eye could see was the mighty Zambezi River. Towards the bottom of the hill, there was a huge cloud of vapor, rising, accompanied by thunderous noise. It was most baffling. What is that sound, and why is there so much smoke over there? Asked Livingstone. That is Mosi Otunya, the great falls, the home of the spirits, answered a warrior. As the party descended the hill, the sound from the hills became louder and louder, and then they were engulfed in mist. I have to see Mosi Otunya, said Livingstone. No problem, the commander of the warriors answered. Soon they were standing at the falls, which stretched for over 400 meters in length, but the depth of the fall was unfathomable. Livingstone turned to Rodgers and said, the world has no equal to this majesty, not the Niagara Falls, not the pyramids of Egypt, the white cliffs of Dover, and the hanging gardens of Babylon. This is the greatest of all wonders in the world. I couldn't agree with you more, said Rodgers, who had taken on his dictionary and was sketching the Great Falls. I name this wonder Victoria Falls, said Livingstone. Why? Asked Rodgers. Because beautiful places deserve beautiful names. Tunya sounds primitive. I'll stop there. End of quote. So here is David Livingstone, divine, and who is a missionary coming to Africa. And after his mission to save his motherland, Scotland, is devoted by the wisdom of the British, decides to change the history, not only of the very valued resources, and that was natural resources that are there in Africa. And you see the casual manner in which he decides to name the world's greatest falls, even today, according to the UNESCO. The name loses, the falls loses its name to the locals. It's a sense of identity. It's what they call it. It means a lot to them. And in the book, you find it a site of a religious site, that is where the kings and the magicians of these people offer their prayers, and they believe it to be such a sacred point. But look at the casual manner in which David Livingstone decides to name this natural feature. It raises concern over what I was talking about previously, and which forms part of the Nairobi Reader issue, the cultural significance of names and the politics of naming. And this is not only the names of people, it's also the names of resources, just as has been committed by David Livingstone in this case. So that is a short review of what happens in The Wayward Vagabond. Ultimately, David Livingstone dies mysteriously in Africa after failing first to save his people and also failing to get the source of Lake Victoria. He dies such a destitute soul, and MGN Kahende punishes him at the end. There is a judgment where the spirit is called to give an account of some of the historical injustices that takes place because of a process that David Livingstone himself initiated in Africa. And now coming to the reality of the world, we all understand what colonialism, and by extension its sister slave trade, did to the history of the world and this part of the continent. These are historical facts that have changed the history of the world. And today, the world battles with, some of the world's greatest civilizations have evolved out of these two processes, that is slavery and colonialism. And with this fiction, we try to look at it from such a casual dream that was birthed by David Livingstone in a bid to save his land. So he decided to save his land by actually enslaving some other people. So in my second part, if that time is still there, I would now try to transition into this issue of the cultural significance of name and the politics of naming, and also try to connect it to the book as I've demonstrated. I give it back to you, Rodgers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Odhiambo, for that presentation. I will open the floor to the members. Whoever has a reaction to the presentation that we received from Mr. Odhiambo can get opportunity to make a comment or react. Thank you. Any reaction from the floor?
Roger, sir, we can call one or two people actually for the insight sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see Ovino there straight away, right in front of my screen. Maybe have a few words.
Ovino Depo Morris.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Oh, okay, thank you. This is actually the first time I'm actively participating in e-Bookery show. I think, I believe Odhiambo has done a very nice presentation of the book and the man that is David Livingstone. And maybe just a bit of the present of David Livingstone that still exists that he might have left out is that actually Malawi has a very strong tie with Scotland, and it has to do with David Livingstone, and the city Blantyre is actually named after David Livingstone's birthplace, Blantyre in Scotland, and that still they haven't had reason to change the name even after independence in 1964. So that kind of naming that he's talking about has been immortalized, and it has a very big impact in the Malawi socio-cultural setup. The architecture and let's say the social life that was introduced in the city of Blantyre still lives on. Yeah, I think that would be my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice. Who else want to come in? I see Marceline Amuga. Or Odhiambo Kasera can come in.
Can you unmute Odhiambo? You're on mute. Send you a prompt. Okay.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Can they hear me? Hello.
We can hear you.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, now we can hear you.
All right. Thank you very much. This is my first time attending this platform. I was invited by Rodgers Otiento. Now, I think Kaumah has done quite good work. I think it's bringing history to life. And I think that is very important. I mean, just to add, I think perhaps we need to now look at that history and how then it continues to inform how we conduct our affairs. And as he goes ahead to say that now the politics of naming and how those names have remained to be important in what we do and how we go about life. But I think maybe for people interested in literature, then we begin to ask questions about what impacts do this have to how we live our lives? Just like Mao Zedong asked when he gathered literature gurus in 1942, how then can this be used to transform the society? Well, I think that could be the interest of Kaumah in his politics of naming. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Kasera. I see somebody, Ogeta.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry I joined late, but I enjoyed the presentation. I will invite. No, I joined through a link that was shared in a group, the legacy. So I decided to join and listen. Maybe next time I'll be here on time, which I enjoyed. Thank you, Kaumah. Sorry.
Rodgers, your audio is missing. Okay, still your audio is missing. Okay, meanwhile, I can call maybe one more person.
Hi, Anil. Oyomboya is, his hand is raised, so I presume he wants to say something.
Please.
Oh, hello.
Boya, go ahead.
Hello.
Go ahead, sir.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. Now, I'm sorry I joined late, but I've had fragments of the discussion, especially on the politics of names. And there is a participant, I think Odhiambo Kasera, raised a concern that of what importance are names to those interested in literature. I doubt if names have any importance. I still insist that we are as scared as the things we name. And one time there was an argument, and I think it circled around diseases and the names we assign to them, that a disease only gets as scary as the name we give it. And so I think names in a way are not so very important. What is important is the attachments that we give to particular names. Otherwise, names are just but abstract stuff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mboya. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, now you're okay. Now you're okay.
Okay. Anyone who wants to come in? I've just seen Shamala. Shamala, have you anything to say? I think if there is no further input, I can again invite Mr. Odhiambo Kaumah to finish on the part of the politics of naming.
Yes, yes, please.
Thank you, Rodgers, once again, and also to the participants who have weighed in on various issues. It's important to know that you followed, and I think that is what is important. So two things are coming out, and it connects to my second part of the presentation, which will be shorter, though ought to have been longer, on the cultural significance of names and the politics of naming, that is. And as Mr. Owino-Dipo mentions, that there are still very strong ties between some of these cities, or let me say the colonial, countries of Africa, and their mother, let me call them their colonial, former colonial fathers. I would say that if I can be excused. So it only tells us the reality that history is. And as Oyomboya also points out, what then do we say, or what then do we think of the names that were given during this period, but which have stayed to this point, or those that have died? Does it make any difference? And as Odhiambo Kasera tries to ask, what are really the importance of name to those people who consider literature as important in defining life in the society? So the issue that I have on my hand, that is the first issue of the Nairobi Reader, tried to gather around 10 essays that were edited into personal and critical reflections on the politics of naming and also the cultural significance of names. And the issues are diverse and the views are also diverse. But one thing that all of them agrees is, first of all, names. And then second, there is a faction that tries to disagree, and they say names are not important. On the surface, it sounds such as an unpopular opinion to say that names are not important. But I want to just pull a piece of phrase that Oyomboya just said during his reaction. He said that what is important is the attachment that we have to those names. So in reading The Wayward Vagabond, and there are several instances where David Livingstone and agents of missionaries of the Christian missions in Africa during that time, and
excuse me, Odhiambo.
Yes.
Just you have a minute before we transit to another session.
Okay.
So kindly, you can summarize in a minute, and we welcome Gladwell to give vote of thanks. Then we transit to the next session. Thank you.
Okay. Cut it short. If you find the issue, you will read it and also try to interact with the various viewpoints that are there on the Nairobi Reader around that topic. I would want to conclude that names are very important, and in my own experience, there is a river that is very close next, that is close to construction of a just a little boy. Today, when I go back to that river and call it, or try to imagine myself calling it with the previous that we used to call it, I feel that the way it looks at me, the way it responds to me is not the same way. And that whoever tries to change the name of a person, the name of a place, the name of a people, changes so much, not only about their identity, but about their life. And not only about their life, about their death as well, because the beginning of a new name is the death of another name. And hoping that we'll continue with that discussion, I feel that one of the greatest mistakes that David Livingstone and his agents did, as brought out in The Wayward Vagabond, was to try to refashion the names of some of these natural features to contain the name of Queen Victoria or any other person that was honored by those names. With that, I want to end it there and give the program back to you. I'm grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Odhiambo, for the presentation. We are sorry the time won't allow. I just want to welcome Gladwell shortly to give vote of thanks. Then we close this and we move to e-Bookery English. Yes, Gladwell.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Kaumah, for your presentation. It has sparked, I think, interest in me. I would really want to read that book. Sorry, I hadn't read it before, but I plan to read it because, yeah, I love historical fiction too. And thank you, everyone. We've seen new people today. Perhaps, sorry, we called on you to participate and you weren't prepared, but feel free to join again. Feel free to join again. We are every 2 weeks, we hold this forum, and we would be glad if you joined us more. Yeah, thank you, everyone, and do have a good afternoon and evening for those who are in Dubai. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gladwell. I think the Africa chapter session is over. Now we can transit to the e-Bookery International. And back to you, Mr. Anil.
Thank you, Rodgers. So that's the end of Africa e-Bookery chapter 2. And I request all of you to stay, if time permits, if calendar permits, for the next session. That's going to happen in another 5 minutes from now. And Rodgers is going to be the speaker for Africa International today, along with another speaker from India. And thank you very much all again. God bless.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Sulata.
Hi, good afternoon.
Nice to see you back.
Pleasure indeed.
Yeah. Just another 10 minutes because this was the Africa chapter. Gunnar sir, good evening.
Good evening, Anil Thomas. Good evening.
How are you?
Very fine, sir. Very fine, sir. Good evening, Sulata, madam.
So just meet Odhiambo Kaumah from Kenya. He was the speaker for the Africa International, the Africa session, Africa chapter. We just concluded the other session.
Four minutes to go for the start. The link has been shared, right, Anil, with everyone?
Yes, it is shared, yes, to all the groups, yes. So it's only 4:57. Usually people join by 5,
10,
10, yeah, because of the Tamil e-Bookery is still happening there, I believe.
Ah, okay, okay. How was this African chapter shaping up? I can
You
see
check,
a lot of
check with Rodgers, he's the man in charge of Africa.
Rodgers. Hi, Rodgers. How are you?
Fine, Sulava. How are you doing?
Great, great. You are from Kenya?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yourself a writer or aspiring writer?
A writer. And you know, we always aspire to be a writer, more writers than we are today.
Good, good.
Can you hear me? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, Roger.
Okay, I'm just trying to set up my
my
audio.
Check your audios because it's going to speak for 20 minutes, so you need to have a proper solid net connection.